Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jerry Lopez, and I'm the Director of Infrastructure. We are doing a live group conversation for infrastructure. And we had an offline question about continuous delivery that I'm going to ask Marian to take on, since he's the one that's provided the detailed answer.
Yep. Thanks, Jerry. First of all, the question is there a plan?
Can we always let the person, if they're in the call, ask the question? It's way more fun for people who watch.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I missed Nicholas in the list of participants.
I hope that I would be able to skip this. Okay, but is there a plan to increase the deployments to production from weekly to daily, or even switch to a continuous deployment for GitLab.com? And what are the blockers now to implement this change?
Great, thanks, Nicholas. So yeah, I wrote up a couple of things in there that are interesting. So basically, I could say we can tweak the frequency of deployments right now if you want to. The problem is, how will this affect the platform? How will this affect all the teams involved in this? And I wrote up some of the examples there, gave you some links. Basically, we need to depend more on automated system and metrics than on our gut feeling, which is, yeah, partially what we are doing right now when we are promoting to production. So what release managers do when promoting to production is talk with SREs, see what the state of the platform is, get the approval, and then click that button for the deployment to go through. We are working to make sure that we remove as much as human interaction as possible. And then for that, we need multiple stakeholders to contribute. So from quality, the rest of the infrastructure org, and development as always. So there is a lot of responsibility in development to know exactly what they're merging and ensuring that when a change is deployed is where the work actually is completed, rather than when you click that merge button. So I'll ask you to ask any additional questions from the comments I wrote up, so I don't go over them again if you want to. I guess that's a no. Anyone else? All right, Sid, over to you.
Yeah, we want to kind of dog food metrics in GitLab. So GitLab has the ability to display Prometheus metrics, and want to use that for GitLab.com. How are we thinking of getting there? I see a few roadblocks. We use multiple Prometheus servers. We use Thanos for the long-term retention of metrics. I heard about some extra information we have in Grafana. We might have alerting set up through that. So now we have to then have some alerting set up to GitLab. What is a simple start to go there? Is the ops server the right place to do this? I just wonder what their thoughts are.
So I specifically don't have details, but if Anthony or Ben are on the call, they can talk about some of these things. But one simple start that we have decided to start with is essentially displaying our uptime in GitLab.com itself as part of the application. So I think the application should have an understanding of whether it's functioning or not, and then be able to display that data. So we've made that a KR for this next quarter. And we also need to sync with the monitor team because they also have that as a KR. So after we sync, then we can get a better plan in place to figure out what we're doing in the near term to implement some of these things.
The uptime, that seems super useful. And that's a thing we kind of struggle to have a single source of truth for that. So that seems super useful. But my idea with dogfooding, or like, obviously it's great to use GitLab for that, but it's a whole new project, a project that has, we've been trying to get a better understanding of our uptime for over a year now. So it's probably a complex new thing. Is there also some existing measure that we can move, something we already know? Like, it's not figuring out the metric that's hard, we just move it to a new environment.
I'm not sure I follow what you mean, Sid.
The uptime, do we have a Grafana dashboard that currently displays that?
We do. It's the, or we call it the SLA dashboard. I'll dig out the URL and post it there.
Okay, so the idea is to move that SLA dashboard.
Right.
Okay, so we're not changing the metric. Okay, I misunderstood that. In that case, that makes a ton of sense. Thanks.
And I'll add, one of the considerations here when we're talking about dogfooding monitor is with respect to metrics and graphs, our workflow isn't that SREs are sitting with dashboards open or have, you know, Chrome extensions that rotate one to the next and next, and they, with vision, detect an anomaly. So the fact that a lot of our reactive response to alerts then has SREs going to dashboards has led us to say, well, we need to keep these in an external non-GitLab.com location, because GitLab, the product to monitor GitLab.com, can't be in GitLab.com. There's a cyclical chicken egg dependency there. So in conversations with the monitor group, I do think we have consensus. Generally, I know we're not consensus driven, that the ops server might be the right place to do this, because a lot of the metrics tend to be a byproduct of the incident management workflow. We have an incident, we have something that we're trying to discern about the status of the system that's not working properly. Let's look at a visualization, in which case the certainty that it would be available to us on ops instead of .com leads us to believe that that's probably the right place. So we had a great conversation, Dave Smith and I, with product earlier this week, and I think we're going to see improved velocity on this.
Thanks, Anthony. That makes total sense. But when I look at issue 6215, I find that it talks about having the metric available on GitLab.com, not on the ops server.
Yes, so we're specifically going to focus on bringing incident management workflows and building additional dashboards into .NET. So we'll adjust this so slightly, but we do want to have these other metrics available on .com as part of a static, not incident workflow availability. Just when GitLab.com is up and running in perfect state and someone else wants access to information and metrics, that will be on .com. But the actual dogfooding of monitor stage is more in the vein of reactive response to incidents and less of the everything's going fine, I'm just looking for metrics, because we could probably separate these two things a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that we should be very clear. The goal is not to have some nice metrics on .com that nobody uses in incidents. The goal is to have our core workflow with GitLab, something we're expecting our customers to do with their applications. So having a metric on .com, I don't think should be in scope of this at all. I think it should be very much focused on the ops server, and it should be a replacement for the Grafana metric. Because if you do things on .com and you say, hey, okay, now we're going to deprecate this Grafana dashboard, it's like, well, if .com is down, where do I look? So I think we should be much more crisp about this.
Okay. One additional consideration that we have is to continue to embody our value of transparency. A lot of our incident communications that are public facing generally depend on updates and comments to what we call our production issue or an incident issue. If that workflow moves to ops, then we would have to rely on a different medium to communicate out to the public the status of the ongoing incident. Now, there are, of course, ways we can bring that back into the incident review issue and the like, but we might need some guidance from a values perspective on what's appropriate to keep in ops, which is not public facing, and what is deemed sufficient for status.gitlab.com.
So I think this is about the issue more than the metrics, your question?
Yes, because the metrics that would find their way into the issue, in addition to the static endpoints, there are a lot of integrations where the graphs can be embedded into the issue. And while you're working on the incident, it's here's a snapshot from Prometheus from this time, and then you could pop out and go look at a different dashboard elsewhere. But that would all be done with the issue as the primary record of truth and live state. So oftentimes when we're updating status.gitlab.com, we give a link to the production issue. That would not be a public URL if we move to the ops installation.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think it gets any worse. Like currently we have private dashboards because we're using Grafana, our dashboards.gitlab.net a lot more than dashboards.gitlab.com. So this is not a change. I do think for incidents, we have a communication officer or person who's designated to do the communication. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that a full-time, is that a like full-time thing at the time there's an incident, like that person is dedicated to communication?
Yes, it's evolving. We're working very closely with customer support to spread responsibility there.
Great, that person can live stream the issue. That person can just be screen sharing and continually talking and sharing the state of the issue and talking people to it.
Thank you.
So, okay, since we're having the conversation, we've waded into a number of different aspects about the metrics. So the one comment that I understood you making was, if GitLab.com is down, then having this update on GitLab.com makes no sense. And I think Anthony's point is we do use production issues as one of the ways in which communicate. So if the logic for the first one applies, then that is also raising this other issue of, should we revisit all the current workflows, which do rely on the production queue on GitLab.com, to move them elsewhere in the same fashion?
I think we should. I think it doesn't make sense. Like if there's a serious incident, and that's one that people are going to hold us accountable, you can't be using an issue on .com. So it makes sense to move them to the ops server. And instead of linking to the production issue via Twitter, we should link to a live stream of the communication person just giving live updates. Like that person is literally, it's going to be a very boring live stream in most of the cases because they'll be just screen sharing the issue and maybe watching some of our internal Slack channels and giving comments based on that.
Do we want to create extra overhead in the process to communicate publicly? It seems a little bit inefficient if we already have everything going into issues, we're communicating there, and that's actually the primary place. Having the additional responsibility of somebody reading that out and showing it seems inefficient to me.
It's not an extra overhead because the manager on call responsible for that communication already has to do something like that. They need to ensure that the discussion in the incident is flowing while the engineers are working. Sometimes you go into different alleys instead of keeping focus on the challenge at hand. So they already have to do those things. Like they need to communicate over Twitter. They need to update the public with what's happening. So that overhead should be minimal, and it's mostly just that you need to start up a YouTube live stream.
Communication in an incident is the most important thing in an incident. Like, I don't know how to stress it. Like fixing the issue is super important, and figuring out a workaround or how to quickly address the issue is also important. But actually communicating to customers what's going on and that you're aware of it is in many instances more important than actually resolving the issue, assuming that you're going to resolve it quickly thereafter.
Well, put it this way though, if you had somebody scrolling down a page to be showing graphs as they're happening, that might be less efficient than that person finding the actual information that, like, you know, just doing the.
I'll stress again, communication.
I
understand what you're saying.
I
understand what you're saying, but we're splitting hairs. And generally what happens in those situations is the person who's trying to solve the problem spends more time trying to solve the problem than actually communicating. And then people are like, okay, are they really working on it? Or is this not a concern?
Sure, and that's why we have the defined role of the CMOC and the IMOC. For those that aren't aware, we have a incident manager on call, which is an IMOC acronym. And then there's a communication manager on call, which is a specific role that's less involved with actually discovering the underlying cause or the solution to the incident, and only concerned with the communication to internal and external stakeholders. In this case, the business and our customers. So I think it's worth splitting hairs and saying that that second role, the communication manager on call, when it comes to what they're communicating, is simply current status and expectations. And provided those two needs are met for the stakeholders, I think the way that that's communicated out is something that we can iterate on because frankly, that person needs an inlet of communication as well. And whether they can feasibly screen share while also being in another Zoom where they're consuming communication and the like may not be realistic, but I think there's definitely an opportunity to explore there. Let's change that. So first of all, very important, manager of the incident is not the communication person. This is a full-time as in completely focused on communicating. It shouldn't be a separate Zoom call. So this person should not be the incident Zoom call and this Zoom call. There's one Zoom call. But for public,
that means, so hang on, let me try and arbitrage this a little bit. So that means having people join, live streaming the incident call, which we cannot do, because sometimes the information that flows through people's screens is,
Oh, that makes sense.
So we stopped doing that a long time ago, and I am not going back there. Second, sort of parroting an incident over a call makes no sense. Incidents tend to be very chaotic events by design, not by design, by their own nature. So you would have someone who's trying to read an issue, much like Dylan pointed out, and then there's going to be times where we're going down a path, then we realize that's not the path, then we go back. That gets communicated on the incident call. So this individual will actually have to be on two calls at the same time, trying to make sense of what's happening in one, filtering in real time, passing things to the other. I mean, it would be messy. I think having an issue that people can trail, where they can trail the comments, is the right way. Everybody does it that way. We've been doing it that way for a long time. We tried the live Google Docs. That crashed in a fantastic way because lots and lots of people would get on that document. So I think the issues plus Twitter has worked well to keep end users well communicated. We fail sometimes at sort of keeping the clock in, saying, okay, every 15 minutes, we're going to give an update. We need to get better at that. And I agree that we've tried to do the IMOC and CMOC based on the number of people that we have available to put on call. Because now you have two SRE rotations, a primary and a secondary, plus you have the managers on call, plus now we need another set of people on call, which is why we've been working with support to get more people available during incidents to be able to do these two things. So I think we're generally working in the direction that you're pointing to, which is for us to be very clear and have a good cadence of communication. But I think going into live streaming, it's pushing us to where we were about a year and a half ago. And because of security concerns, I would not go back to live streaming incidents. Just because we may find
that makes sense. That makes sense. Like you don't have to explain further. Yeah, it makes sense that we're going to tail confidential information. Okay, is there another way? Is there, I don't know, I'm going to ask obvious questions that I think I know the answer to, but is there a way to open up ops.gitlab.net in a way that we make a public project for the incident, or we open up the issue tracker only to the public? Maybe not, maybe that whole server is cordoned off also to prevent the DDoS or something like that. But is there a way to have public issues on that server?
Jarv?
So is Jarv here? I haven't seen him on the list. Anyway, I can answer that question. Ops is not cordoned off from public, but Ops is also a single node, single instance that is crucial for our operational needs on GitLab.com. So increasing the load and opening ourselves up for possible denial of service would not be great. Alternative, if we decide to cordon off that, we will have to have VPNs and we will have to deal with that stuff. So I think—
Can we use Geo? Can we have Geo follow for the ops instance that we can point people towards?
Well, let me ask one quick question before that. So if the objective is to have something that is out of band from GitLab.com to provide updates so people can see the issue and not necessarily participate, building something that builds sort of static versions of that on a regular basis, and simply it sits in front of, like, we can do status.gitlab.com and point to the right issue at the root, and it's just every minute it's just scraping whatever comments and posting them. Like, there are solutions to do this without necessarily overloading ops instance or open it to unwanted players.
Yeah,
And I'll comment that that's also one of our product categories, status page. So that would be a great opportunity for us to start dog fooding, a feature like that where you're kind of trailing the incident directly to a separate page.
Yeah,
And
so we can definitely work on that.
We can do that safely with ops as well. It is behind Cloudflare, so we will have a lot of DDoS protections on that. We can scale it up a little bit to accommodate that use case. But I think what we're all describing is a status page.
Cool. Let's think about it. But thanks for the conversation. Thanks, Cesarea. Thanks, Anthony. This is interesting.
Cool. So we're 5 minutes to the end of the call. I don't see any additional questions. All right. Cool. Well, thank you so very much. I'll echo Sid's comments. This has been one of the livelier, more entertaining infra group conversations. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks.